Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, frequent flyers. Thank you for joining me here in the lounge today. Today, I have a special guest, Samantha Dolski. We met at the Earthlight Foundation's New Worlds event here in Austin last November. And as we were getting to know each other, I learned that she is studying aerospace engineering, and she's a director at one of the labs here at UT Austin. I love supporting women in STEM fields, particularly aviation and aerospace. To see her eyes just light up as she spoke about this, really connected to that piece in my heart that really loves to support women in this space. And I immediately asked if she'd love to come on the podcast, and she said yes. Samantha, thank you so much for being here with me today.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. I am super glad to be speaking with you finally, Sarah, and I'm just so grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So, I know it's been a few months since we connected. And I found this amazing quote. Space.com just put out all of these space quotes from inspiring women in the aerospace industry. And it's from Nancy Levenson, Deputy Director of the Space Telescope Science Institute, saying, "We need the brilliance and innovation of all people to face today's challenge and to succeed at our extraordinary ambitions and be part of the solution." And I can see that in you. You are being part of the solution. You're taking on this leadership role, and you're really helping to drive education and innovation. And I know you do a lot of work with your sorority to help empower other women around you. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. I want to know more. Where did you find your love for aerospace engineering? Was this something that you knew since you were little you wanted to do, or was this something you grew to love later?
Yeah, my love for aerospace and just learning about space in general started when I was in middle school. Like a bunch of other people, they probably stumbled on space documentaries. I was really into how the universe works, and I just grew such a liking towards learning about different theories like wormholes and multiverses and all of that. And that really piqued my interest in exploring aerospace. And so through that experience in middle school, I wanted to be in astrophysics. I was pursuing physics. I took a quantum physics class during my, I think, sophomore year of high school. Once I started digging into that, though, I mean, physics is great and all, but you really don't see the large application of your work. A lot of the times, a lot of it is limited to research, and I wanted to create products and expand our knowledge and be part of that initiative to better understand our place, our humanity in terms of the universe. And so I thought, you know what, engineering is the way to go. Creating that instrumentation to provide more insight into the physics that our universe is built upon is something that I think really drives me to work every day at my degree. So I pursued aerospace engineering here at UT Austin, and I'm in my third year.
Awesome. That's really cool. My mom and you would get along because she is totally into the quantum physics and physics realm. That's how her brain works. And I find that stuff fascinating. And at the same time, a lot of it goes over my head. But I totally geek out on it. I love being around people who really live in that world and who can explain it in a way that doesn't require diving into the math and all the nitty gritty. And what I really love about what you just shared is how you recognize that while this was something that was interesting, you wanted to go from ideation to creation. And so that's ultimately why you pivoted into aerospace engineering. Because I think a lot of people sometimes get stuck on the initial idea of something that they love or are passionate about. And there's actually multiple ways to be able to apply our interests as well as the other things that drive us in the creation side of things.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, researchers are so integral to any scientific development, that has occurred, understanding our placement of our humanity in terms of the universe. But I'm just myself, I love being actionable and giving opportunity for that science to occur. And there needs to be that set of people for researchers to thrive on data and be able to make innovations like that. And that's what engineers do. So I really aligned more with that sector of science.
Yeah, no, beautiful. And absolutely, we do need both sectors. And what is really important there is the fact that you identified that sweet spot for yourself. Because sometimes what looks pretty on paper, what sounds good, is what we start to chase after, but we don't really stop to question, hey, does this align with my personality? Does this align with how I recharge my energy? Does this actually align with how I want to live every single day, with my lifestyle, with the way I'm going to interact with colleagues. And so the fact that you were able to hone in on that so early is really powerful. Was there like a turning point for you, a kind of some event or something that made you really realize, or was this just through a bit of time diving into that research, realizing that that maybe wasn't the best fit?
Yeah, there was two distinct moments where I kind of transitioned from my love for physics into a love for engineering. The first one was taking that quantum mechanics course at a Harvard summer school that I did sophomore year of high school. And I took that course and I was like, I don't know if I can, keep just sitting at the blackboard, like writing equations. It's important, but it didn't really get my interest peaked.
Yeah.
But another huge project that I'm actually still working on that really led to my fascination with engineering was my research and continued research on Mars global dust storms. Initially, I wanted to take my research through the lens of using physical data from satellites currently orbiting Mars. And I looked at a lot of the limitations with that data, especially getting like dust opacity data and thermal data to read the surface and kind of get an idea of the weather there. It's nearly impossible to do like the timing and location constraints of those satellites.
Right.
And so I had to go through model-based research. And I realized if we really want to become that multiplanetary species that's kind of become the buzzword of our generation,
Right.
we have to start thinking about researching the planets that we'll be visiting more extensively. And that can only happen with good instrumentation, not just our refined models.
Amazing. Yeah, I think identifying those moments is so key because that's also a skill set, right? And as you go through the rest of your career, that those moments will be able to kind of act as compasses in a way, as well as anchors to help guide and remind you of, what's your mission and how do you fit into the overall bigger picture? Because I think, as you mentioned, in order for us to become a multiplanetary species, we do need to look at the bigger picture and we need to understand how our role really impacts everything else. And that requires communication with all the other parties, understanding how each different section and subsection works together, how they rely on each other. And ultimately, all of that is going to come into play as well as you develop these technological innovations that can get us the data, that can get us on next step further down in this process as we continue to explore.
Definitely.
So for our listeners out there, who a lot of my listeners are already in aviation and aerospace, but many of them also have kids. And typically, girls are not always exposed to careers in STEM. They're not exposed to aviation and aerospace as realms of possibility to explore. That's been historical. It is shifting. It is starting to turn the corner. And it's more of this conversation of diversity amongst so many different areas. But how could you encourage people that might be watching, whether it's themselves or their kids, why STEM is something that they could consider as a possible career path or even as a possible hobby to begin exploring?
Yeah, I mean, every person has a place and a sense of belonging in the STEM field. Looking at my lab, the lab I work at, I'm currently director of avionics of the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, and majority of our leadership is comprised of women. And women just bring so many valuable skill sets to the table, just like men. That could be more technical oriented skills. I mean, we have some top engineers that are going to SpaceX, Blue Origin that are women, but also looking at the communication skills that women also present. Talking amongst engineers, doing that system engineering, that organization is super, super pivotal to getting projects and different systems together, working and oriented. And women tend to flourish in leadership positions just like men. And so I think there's always a place and sense of belonging for women in the industry. So
that's awesome. And I love that you're doing your part to help showcase that, because there, I think, is still a little bit of this stigma of, oh, is that the place for me? And so getting that exposure at younger ages, being able to communicate that like we are doing today on the podcast is really crucial to helping clear the fog, if you will, and show this kind of clear pathway. And I agree with you. The different mindsets, the different perspectives of both men and women, as well as generations, as well as different cultures, all of those are really critical for us to be able to be more well-rounded in how we approach things. Because I know, I mean, even earlier today, I had a miscommunication with my mom because we were texting, right? And so when you're reading a text message, you are also reading it through whatever emotional landscape you're currently in. So if you're busy, if you're upset about something else, that filters all the communication, whether it's a text, an email, a phone call. And so being able to know how to communicate really requires an understanding of self as well as appreciation for an openness to other perspectives rather than trying to fight for, no, my perspective is best.
Yeah, and I think these opportunities for the younger generation moving into the aerospace industry and presenting those opportunities for equality really start at leadership. My mom and my grandma are very strong women. My mother was an electrical engineering major, and so I learned very on about that hard work ethic and aligning it with the female identity, that it was certainly possible while also still, being able to do all the other things that men and women can do. And looking into the lab, right, having that majority female leadership, I really think inspires women and deconstructs that sense of imposter syndrome that a lot of women, including me, feel in the field. And I think through, class by class in college and then the kids that follow, with some people that have graduated, that starts to create a culture where women are more accepted into those spaces like labs and classes and, top careers.
And what would you say to women who maybe are in those spaces that are feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome? What have you found that has helped you to overcome that, particularly, leading this lab, and as you start to go out and have these internships and different work opportunities, what are some of the things that have been really instrumental in helping you stay strong and grounded in that mindset?
Yeah, I think number one thing is a sense of community, and that could be amongst women and it can be amongst men and so many different identities. For example, I just had a flight dynamics exam right before this, and it was the worst exam that we've all collectively have taken. We were just collectively in shock. And I think when you start to have that support group within aerospace classes, UT Austin does a really great job for providing that small community within the degree program. You get to learn about other people's strengths and weaknesses as well, and it puts yours into perspective and kind of legitimizes why you may have strengths in a certain area and weaknesses in another area, and it normalizes it. So I really think that communication amongst engineers is super, super important. So we get to learn where our strong areas are at and collaborate in an effective way where we're just successful.
I love that. And, it's really refreshing to speak with you as well, being of a different generation, because, I think with each generation collectively as human beings, we are getting better at communication. We are getting better at understanding the whole self, how left brain and right brain really work together to create innovation, to support us in our endeavors. And so something that seems more difficult for my generation or above is normal to you now, right? It's just part of the narrative. It's no longer this thing to overcome, right?
Mhm.
So that is how we bit by bit do see the tide shift. And that is another reason for why there's these, generational differences, because every generation says the same thing about the previous one. Like, oh, they don't understand this, or the work ethic is different, or the communication is different. And it should be, because that is how we grow. That's how we evolve. So it's also the responsibility of people in my generation and every other generation to understand that and grow together. Because if we don't, that rocket's going to leave without us, right? And so we can complain about it, or we can get on board and we can learn like how to work together cooperatively, because ultimately we have the same vision and the same goals.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. As we're entering this new space age, there really is no place of isolation of certain people. I mean, having as many hands on deck, having as many different sets of knowledge on your team, and people who are motivated to work is going to be super important in having people compete effectively and grow the space economy even more. Uh, So it should be really exciting to see all of that kind of expand.
Yeah, I love that. I also read something this morning that was talking about how Gen Z is actually opting for more vocational or apprenticeship type of training as well, more hands-on type of work rather than
Mhm.
the kind of traditional intellectual desk job. And I think that is a great trend because I know in the aviation world, there is, especially on business aviation, but across the board, there is a shortage not only of pilots, but of mechanics, of engineers, of
Mhm.
people to be able to actually implement the things these brilliant minds are creating, as you said, right, from ideation and then putting it into practice, making it real and tangible and having it happen. From your perspective, what is the narrative that you're hearing at school? Do you see anything along those lines as well? And if so, how do you think we can continue to bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. More and more am I seeing people focus on getting that technical hands-on work experience. And you see that because you have this rise in new space, these new space companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, coming out and sending their interns straight into and diving deep into really complex projects and having them figure it out. And that is one of the most important styles of learning, in my opinion, and really supersedes just your typical, classwork. And engineering is really about that hands-on work. And so it's interesting to see kind of this reform in education, which I believe our lab is also leading, where you're beginning to supplement homework and tests with actual projects, whether that be CADing, creating simulations, anything in any discipline of rocket science. And that's how people become, competitive in the job market. And we're seeing so many people who just have many more skills entering into entry positions.
That's really refreshing to hear. And it's also important to remember through that hands on experience, we can actually fail faster to learn faster, right?
Mhm.
Because we're testing it out. It's not just a simulation or an idea. And I think that we do need to reform in education. The old models of, like, hey, memorize all this stuff for a test and just regurgitate it out is not actually helping us learn how to think, learn how to solve problems. It's just teaching us how to memorize and regurgitate and get the gold star for passing the grade, right? And so I love to hear that you're already experiencing that in the school system, but also tell me more about the lab. What is the lab that you are working in and leading, and what exactly are you guys doing there? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I am a director at the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab. We're an engineering lab, student run at UT Austin, that is focused on building a liquid bipropellant rocket that is the goal to be reaching the Kármán line, which is 100 kilometers. It's technical space. A lot of previous student run labs, they've built solid fueled rockets or that have gone to space, or they've built liquid bipropulsion, but haven't reached that Kármán line. So our big goal was combining those two goals and reaching space. But we have a whole bunch of teams. We have technical teams, we have design teams that ranging from structures, our thrust vector control system, which orients our engine in different ways, our propulsion teams, fluids teams, and we have our testing teams where we actually put all of those designs and ideas into practice and build test stands.
Yeah.
And we also have our business teams and our outreach teams, which kind of propagate our really important message with the lab is building people who build rockets. Where our greatest intention is building this rocket, but we're also wanting to build the engineers that enter these industries and are part of the new space age. So
I love that. I'm just going to type that in here for people. Building people that build rockets.
yes.
That really reminds me of I used to work for a company called Universal Weather and Aviation, and their tagline is moving organizations that move the world. And it's powerful, right? It really, you understand exactly what's happening. And I love this too, because it's one thing to build a rocket, but we really need to build the people who are building those things so that they have community, so that they have support, so that they have places to go. Mental health is taken care of. We have the just safety culture, and we're not isolating people
Mhm.
for silly reasons, right? So I think we've had big strides from old space to new space. And it's really awesome to hear, what you guys are doing. How did you determine that was your goal regarding reaching the Kármán line and also doing this bipropulsion? Was it just because it's not been done before? Was there another factor that kind of comes into play here? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, so the lab existed since 2018. They've had that goal since then. I joined when I was a freshman, my first semester of college in 2021. So I never wanted to get into rocketry. I never even, the thought hadn't crossed my mind. I was really into, right, that satellite instrumentation initiative with planetary science. But I looked at a lot of the kind of progress that had been made within different student labs and seeing this really outrageous goal presented by the university. And I'm like, you know what? This seems really difficult. Why not do it? And I applied and I joined the fluids team. And I immediately started working on calculations of like determining like flow conditions needed within our fluid lines. We have like our liquid oxygen fluid lines, our rocket propellant fluid lines, our helium fluid lines. And then a semester after was promoted to being the testing lead of all the fluids components. So I helped revamp a high pressure test stand, wrote some of the test plans for that, especially like our control system for like tank pressing.
Yeah.
And I just kind of fell in love with having so many resources and just like so many different possibilities that I was able to, go down or different avenues to travel down with my, engineering. And I think really having that space to be creative and scrappy is super important in building an engineer. And we're seeing that a lot more with the new generation of engineers and new space. I mean, you look at SpaceX and Elon Musk's company, where they're now, they've stopped buying, valves and different products, and outsourcing that and now have been making them in-house. And we're kind of seeing that with our lab as well, where we're 3D printing components and we're trying to, lower costs as much as possible. And it's interesting to see kind of this new space industry perspective entering the collegiate level. And I hope to see that continue.
Yeah, I love that. My goodness. I love the creative, scrappy part because, it is true. We have to do things we haven't done before in order to get results that we don't have and that we've never had before. And it requires a bit of that scrappy energy of like pulling things together and just that kind of wild hair. I love it. The mindset of this seems difficult. Why not do it? Right. Instead of the opposite typical, oh, it's so hard. And what about this and this and this? We go too far on the one side of the spectrum. Bringing it onto the other side just flips it and makes it exciting. And there's ways to do it where we can still be safe, where we can still play within these boundaries of safety, but we can accelerate that innovation and that learning. And as you so mentioned, that's what Elon's been doing with SpaceX. And so seeing that come into the collegiate level is very exciting. I can see it in your eyes. You're super passionate. But this is something I think a lot of adults can learn from. It's as we get older in our lives, we typically start to become more risk adverse because it threatens the stability of what we've built. Like we've created this reality for ourselves. We know how to play by these rules. We know where the lanes are. And, as you have kids, you have a house, you have a mortgage, you've got all these things, all of a sudden, you don't want to be as risky, right? Because you want to protect these things. And yet that energy is still super important if we're going to grow, if we're going to expand, if we're going to push the boundaries and also leave this planet and go and not just like circle around, but actually go somewhere, stay there, explore, do more science. There's so many fascinating things that are happening right now. Obviously, we have the eclipse coming up. And I think that's a really great way for a lot of non-space people to get a taste of this awe and this wonder that is really part of your day-to-day world.
Yeah, and I was about to dig into that as well, Sarah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with these two disciplines really starting to merge and have this tug and pull kind of relationship. You're seeing a lot of old space and senior engineers, which have every right to be risk adverse and prioritize different standards and requirements. And you're seeing this kind of shift with new space, like these new companies and new engineers wanting to be scrappy, kind of getting rid of requirements till they need to add them back in and try different methods. It's more entry-level engineers and younger voices entering that arena. And it has caused a lot of tension. Like you see, I just read the Walter Isaacson biography on Elon Musk and seeing those tensions between different types of leaders within the space industry, and having something that has been the convention since the dawn of the space age being kind of challenged now with new companies and new students entering their careers is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say this, this is the dot-com era for space. This is the big boom that we're seeing all these companies coming out and competing and seeing what works and what doesn't, what succeeds and what fails. So it should be really interesting what principles really do work here.
Yeah. And we're in this era of, we're figuring it out. We don't even really know what it will look like or what it can look like. It's just, we're like on this budding edge, the cusp of these breakthroughs. And I was on a call earlier with the Earthlight Foundation with Rick Tumlinson, and we're preparing for the eclipse coming up. We're preparing for Earth Day on April 22nd. We're hosting a conversation live with some different speakers in the industry about the Earth space concept. And he was saying that there was a video that had popped up, and I forgot who it was. I think he said it was David Bowie. I'm going to have to go back, but it was this video that popped up of someone speaking about what the internet was like way back when it was just first starting, and articulating it in a way that was, now we look at it and we're like, oh yeah, that's what the internet is, of course. But back then, nobody knew what it was, right? No, everyone was like, what's this thing? Is it going to work? How is this going to affect our lives? I mean, and now we can't even imagine life without it. And probably 5-10 years from now, same thing with AI, same thing with a lot of technologies that we currently right now are like, wow, this is revolutionary. They'll be commonplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely super fascinating, super exciting time.
Yeah. And so how would you encourage people who might be on this old space, new space fence? How would you encourage them to work together, looking at it from both sides?
Yeah, I think the collaboration between the two disciplines is very necessary. I mean, looking at my lab, one of our shortcomings, right, is having really excited, hyper-technical engineers coming in and wanting to push away any sort of concept of documentation or procedures and whatever. And that's really great for spurring new ideas and like really quick sprints of progress. But it sometimes hurts the knowledge transfer that issue that we face, being a 4-year university and having that turnover rate, and kind of having some oops moments every now and then. So having a good mix of like having a bit of old space discipline and especially systems engineering and requirements writing, but also challenging that systems engineering and those requirements with new space discipline is super important. And I think that kind of ebb and flow between those two presences are very necessary.
Yeah, really well put. I think the important thing to remember is, by very nature, the scientific method is testing new data points, is testing, new information that comes in, but you still need a control group. You still need something to test it against so that you can compare and contrast. And so if that's not happening, then yes, there's this excitement, but knowledge transfer is lost. Can you repeat the results? Is it really the new rule that we follow, or is it just a one-time thing, like an outlier effect? And so that's really important. And, we can temper that by having the diverse teams. And I think a little bit of what has to come into play here too is this acknowledgement of the ego, right? Because a lot of people want to protect what they have built. Maybe this is their baby they've been working on for like 40 years and now it's getting challenged.
Yeah.
But that's okay too, because like the floppy disk was revolutionary in its time, but we're not using floppy disks today, right? We're not even using, like, I have no thumb drive on my laptop. I have to get an adapter to plug that thing in and be able to access information. So there will always be new advances. And it's not saying that your way was wrong or bad. It's just there's now new information and there's new ways to do things. Let's go and explore those. And we'll also appreciate like where they came from, because that was part of the stepping stone to get to the next thing. And so the more we can kind of relax that and keep the growth mindset, I think both sides will be able to work a little bit better together.
Yeah, definitely. So this summer I'll be working at Relativity, a new space company as a systems engineering intern. And so I'm really excited to see, systems engineering and that documentation process and that verification process in the lens of a very new space-oriented company, a company that's been growing so quickly and really pushing the boundaries of rocket engineering through 3D printing technology.
Yeah.
And, you see with a lot of these companies that systems engineers, they start, digging into the low-level technical work as well and start sewing the threads that need to be threaded to have the systems kind of well together and mesh really well. You do see with a lot of engineers, especially, within their lab, that they get so into the weeds of their own system that they don't consider the puzzle piecing with other systems and the other requirements that their systems need. And so I'm really excited to take on that higher level role of covering all those bases, but also delving into those systems lower level as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you're going to be zooming out, getting more of that like 30,000 foot view.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that you brought up the closed system mindset. Like, how does it work within this creation? But also remembering that that system, that creation is also designed to communicate with and be a part of others. And so how do we make sure we don't lose sight of that? Because what's maybe perfect or ideal for this system as a closed thing may not always be the best, most highest good for the rest once you start to connect the pieces. So it's really important to have those elements, the thread line, as you said, sewn through everything. And what I'm hearing is that you're really keeping that open mind, the beginner's mindset into every environment that you go into.
Yeah, I've progressed through so many disciplines in rocket engineering, and I'm even looking to kind of zooming out of that and trying something else after. But I've been on, fluids design and fluids testing. I was director of operations last summer, which was more systematic, and now I'm director of avionics, which heads all of the electrical and simulation work for the rocket. And I'm like, I'm waiting to explore the next discipline, and I think that's what makes rocket engineering so interesting is seeing how all these very vastly different disciplines start making sense with all the others. Like, for example, we're redoing our simulation, our 6 degrees of freedom simulation for our GNC team, and realizing, the types of information that we need to prove that our thrust vector control system can, work accurately, and proving like our dynamics and all of that, and being able to support like structural analysis with our 6DOF it's interesting to kind of like dip in and out of these different lenses. And I think that's what makes the discipline so fascinating. And yeah, I want to provide more visibility on that.
I love that. I think the key takeaway there for everyone watching is get exposed to the different disciplines. You may not necessarily stay there as, in your career path, but that exposure to the different disciplines, understanding how they work, including if you're already working, right? Let's not even talk about school. Once you're in the workforce, understanding how the different departments work, understanding their initiatives, their goals, how they do things, how their systems work, ultimately is going to help you in your endeavors as well, because you're going to see how do you best fit into connecting to their system or their department. How do you best fit into taking what your goals are and aligning them with the objectives of your colleagues so that you can move these things forward together? Because sometimes what happens if we do things in isolation, then we're almost competing internally with each other for resources or for getting time or attention. And ultimately that harms the overall mission. And so thinking about things as a full system and being crew that are working together on this journey is a really great mindset, whether you're in school, going back to school, or in the workforce already.
Yeah, definitely.
So Samantha, I know you mentioned in the bio that you gave me that you also play the piano. And I love hearing when people that are very technical as you are, I mean, the things that you're doing are just like so amazing in the science world, in rocket engineering. And then yet you still nurture that creative side. Can you tell me more how that has been really helpful in your journey? And what are some of the things you think that's helped you with?
Yeah, I think, speaking with a bunch of engineers and getting into higher level classes and higher level work, it can get very overwhelming, being in sucked into the discipline that you're working in. It takes a lot of brain power and it takes a lot of collaboration. And so, throughout my life, music had been such an outlet for me. I've been writing music since,
You've been
beginning of high
writing music
school.
as well. Cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've been writing. I love writing waltzes 3/4 time. Chopin's the best.
Amazing.
And I have been playing since I was like 5 years old. And I really do think, the arts help develop your brain in more complex ways to deal with the abstract problems that engineering poses.
Mm.
For me, music is playing it is very mathematical in a way. And I really think that led to my greater capabilities of doing math and being able to handle the rigor of computation presented in my engineering classes. But at the same time, I think it exposes my brain to a different outlet of like thinking of problems differently and giving myself a break, but also a productive break,
Yeah.
especially, with rise of phones and everything. It's like you have very unproductive breaks. And with the rigor of the engineering degree plan, it's like you need to be productive in relaxing your mind. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And giving yourself that different part of your brain to focus on will help relax that thinking logical mind, right? The step by step, if then thinking brain, because we do need to rest those. And sometimes we just get so focused on, I need to study more, I need to do more tests, more research, more this, more that. But we're not actually able to give ourselves that space to think, to be creative. This is why everyone says that they get their best ideas when they're in the shower or when they're washing dishes, or they forgot their headphones when they're out on a walk. It's because all of that noise, for lack of a better term, can settle, and all of a sudden those connections can start firing, and you just start thinking in new ways and different ways. And that's why I know there's a lot of research done about walks. Also, you're in a new environment, you're exposed to new stimulus, and that's going to spark different ways of thinking for you. And as you were speaking, have you read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir?
I have not.
So I just read this book. I got it actually a year ago, and it's been sitting on my shelf. And one of my goals from last year was really to give myself permission to read more fiction books, because I love the nonfiction books, but ultimately, again, that's not letting my brain rest, right? And so going into a different realm, I just love science fiction. And so this book was phenomenal. And I think you'd really love it for many reasons. And I don't want to give anything away, but what you were just talking about with like music and the notes and how our brains work and the conversation, especially for engineers, I think there's going to be some sections in there that will really you'll be smiling when you read them. So if you do end up reading that book, I'd love to hear what your take on it is.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That sounds very interesting. And to add on to that point, the community at UT Austin for aerospace engineering is so welcoming, and I've never felt closer with a group of people as we're just going through the real depths of our coursework. But there is always kind of that hidden competitiveness, right? But you see so many amazing, intelligent, successful people getting great internships and doing really crazy things within the lab and all of that and having great success. And so there is that inherent sense of competition and outdoing and wanting to be hyper productive. And so I think in that kind of space it's very difficult. It's important to give yourself that permission, like you said, to rest and explore your humanity and your artistic and creative side. And I believe that lets you be more productive as an engineer as well. I've been trying to prioritize my sleep better, and already I'm doing better on my assignments. So it's kind of like a positive feedback loop, right? Where it's the constant environment of engineering can be very good for learning engineering, but you always have to reel yourself back in, just check in and make sure that you're living, outside of that realm as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, sleep is, I don't know why we started to attach honor to not sleeping. It's actually really bad for you. Sleep is the ultimate performance enhancing drug for anyone who wants to optimize their mental or physical or emotional performance. I started wearing one of these, the Whoop. And actually, I got sponsored by them. So I have a link on my LinkedIn profile and on all my socials where you can go and get 30 days free, but it tracks your sleep, your blood oxygen levels, your all sorts of lifestyle factors that you can self-report, and you can start to really see what impacts you. And when I journal, my recovery score gets boosted 5%. When I meditate, when I do breath work, when I eat in daylight hours, all these different factors you can start to assess. And for someone like me who's very type A, who's very, most of my life has been in the left brain world because I thought I needed to kind of shut away the right side
Mhm.
creativity, too muchness. It's really helped give me that permission, as you so rightly said. Give yourself the permission to explore your humanity. That like is literally what we do, right? I mean, we need people, we need the poets to write about and people to write symphonies and music about these explorations, about these innovations that we have. And when you look at history, people like Leonardo da Vinci, they were both, right? They were not just engineering, they were also artistic. They had multi-disciplines. And I think that is how we are going to continue to advance ourselves. So I love to hear that you're giving yourself more sleep because that's something I started to do as well. And it was like, wow, I'm so shocked that I feel better. Actually, I shouldn't be shocked because I
It's
really
something
need them.
everybody says it, and you're like, okay. And you'll like kind of just like, you'll skip on it now and then. You're like, oh, I actually really need to take this advice seriously. Like people
Yeah,
are saying it for a reason, but
yeah,
we
absolutely.
always get
And
to that point.
I feel the culture is shifting again. We're now moving more into this kind of like, let's retreat away from being on devices all the time. Let's be out in nature more. Let's bring back that humanness, the beingness, not just the doing. Let's decouple our value from the productivity and the things we do, right? And so that's why it's so important to a word or by a job title, right? We have multi interests, we have multi talents. And ultimately, I mean, this is what you're doing now. Who knows 30 years from now what you might be doing? Will you still be doing rocket science? Maybe. Maybe it'll go off in some other track and you're going to kind of reflect back and be like, wow, look at where I started and look at where I'm at now. And of course, there will be threads and connection points between it all, but it doesn't have to look the same forever.
Yeah, my goal is to just jump around as many different disciplines as possible and see what I can get my hands on. And I think that's what makes it fun. Is just having everything refreshed once in a while and
Yeah,
keeping your
the
brain
play,
on. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, treating it like play, and being able to, as you said, right? If you only kind of face this discipline now, and in 10 years, it'll be much harder for you to overcome that curve of new knowledge and information rather than having already been integrated in it. And so I think obviously there's a need for specialists, there's a need for like deep, narrow focus, but we also need to be able to connect all of those things together for the ultimate whole, right? We can't just treat, we're now learning, for example, about the human body that just taking an organ out, even though it does nothing, actually has effects, actually, impacts the whole system. And
Mhm.
again, back to the systems thinking, right? All of these individual parts were designed to be part of a system. So when you start tinkering with only one of them, it will have a ripple effect with everything else.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Amazing. Samantha, this has been so much fun. And I love hearing your fresh insights and you're extremely inspiring. I've had an opportunity to also explore some more like hands-on work within the aviation field, and so I'm considering it. I'm gonna go and have a visit, and who knows, maybe I'll be doing some engineering myself one of these days.
That's
But I
great.
would love to hear from you. What do you think is your superpower?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I think my superpower is my ability to communicate and link so many different disciplines together into a
Mm,
cohesive project or message.
yeah, that's very evident in the way you articulate yourself.
Thank you.
And that's something that we need also because not everyone's designed that way. And so by you being there, you're able to help get others on board, right? Because you can speak the different languages of all these
Mhm.
different disciplines, of all these different perspectives. And so that's really important. I encourage you to keep cultivating that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. In a world that's very categorization based, it was kind of confusing to me trying to navigate what my place within engineering is supposed to be. And I'm still, obviously figuring that out. I'm very early on, but I don't think, within society we really prioritize or applaud having people kind of be a jack of all trades and being able to interact with different groups. It's either you have to really become specialized in a certain discipline or you have to try something else. And so I within the engineering culture, I'm really hoping that people start to embrace, that sense of different interest and that multidisciplinary nature of their personalities.
I love that. Yes. And be more of those connector points, right? Not everyone has to do that, but it is important that we don't rely on just the handful of people to be the connection points. Having more overlap, OJT, understanding of what the others are doing. And ultimately that improves our communication. That helps us get in alignment, and it becomes much easier to run the business because you're no longer having these fights, right, between departments for competing resources, when actually they're probably trying to do the same thing, but they're just not languaging it properly, right? They don't have that understanding. So that's really cool. When you make your decisions in life, we all kind of have our own personal board of directors, the people we go to that we bounce ideas off of, get perspectives, and then ultimately we still make our own decisions. But who would you say is on your personal board of directors?
Do you mean in like technical decisions or like
All
personal life
decisions,
goals?
right? Yeah. So like your personal board, think that like, okay, it's Samantha Inc., right? And when Samantha Inc.'s going to make a decision about something, she needs to kind of consult with the rest of the board and understand all the perspectives and all the things that maybe she didn't consider, right? So are there specific people, whether it's school, work, technical, relationships, what I'm going to eat for the next week kind of questions? But do you have people like your kind of go-tos that you check in with to help give you perspective? These people could be in your inner circle, or they could be people that you follow online that you really respect. They could be from the past, but just more about like that lens that helps you get new perspectives.
Yeah, I'll give two answers to this one. So in terms of more technical decisions, I think, with my current work, I am one of like 9 directors. And so I consult with them pretty regularly on lab-wide issues, technical issues that have also like business or outreach backing. They're very multidisciplinary. They're the people that I'm closest with, and we're great friends, and we are also great at working with each other. So that has been a pleasure working with them. But in more personal life decisions, whether that be, focusing on my career, working, on self-identity and whatever, what interests me and what I want to do, those people have been a great influence in my life. At the lab, I've met my greatest friends there, have learned about, what the possibilities are there for me, what the interests are, and different people's life's paths and what that may mean to me, and how I might relate to all those different little bits and pieces of everybody's stories. And outside of, my friendship circle, I would say my parents, my mom and my dad, they're very successful, career-driven people, but also very loving people. And they've given me, so much advice on, how to prioritize, what values that you should have for your career, and also putting yourself and your health first. And outside of, family, my friends at my sorority just help, put fun, as a priority as well. Being able to just like laugh and explore Austin here and live in the moment as well is, something that all of us should work more towards, while balancing our careers. So,
yes, that is very wise advice that a lot of times I think people intellectualize. We know, but we don't really allow ourselves to do more. And ultimately, today is the only moment, right now is the only moment that you can actually show up for, right? And be fully in. And so I heard something on a podcast recently, and he phrased it like, have a love affair with the unfolding of the present moment. And I thought it was really well said because, when we can fall in love with that process, that's when we can show up and we stop like projecting and worrying about what will happen tomorrow or like ruminating about the past. You brought up levity, laughing, fun. Like these are all parts of the success formula, right? We need those release valves. Those are healthy release valves. Otherwise, we end up turning to coping mechanisms, which ultimately deteriorate and decline, our perspectives over time. So Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And I think, having, really hard working ethic and being anxious in some sorts can be very helpful, and it makes people very successful. But at the same time, I think people are starting to realize now that you can only have that energy for so long, and there needs to be certain upkeep to being able to be the most productive that you can be. And so that constant yin yang of, type a little bit of healthy anxiety, and then also prioritizing your health and, outreaching to other parts of your life is super important to, even extending this innovation, like within this industry, right? You see a lot of engineers that tend to be overworked and they kind of fall into that cycle, but there needs to be more education on that for us.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big advocate for that mental health, that optimization of performance, which is why I wear the Whoop band, because it gives me this data for myself that allows me to then make informed choices on, like, hey, if I do this thing, I know that will impact my recovery, whether it's a positive or negative impact. I now at least am the one deciding, like, okay, I can accept that, right?
Mhm.
Rather than feeling like shock of like, oh my gosh, how'd I get here again? Right.
Yeah.
And so it is a bit of a balance. It's more of like an integration and learning. Everyone has their own methods. I think over time we also grow, we change, we have different seasons. And I like that you kind of touched on the healthy anxiety. You know, People who are high performing, we do push that edge. And when you push boundaries, it's uncomfortable, right?
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what kind of like pushback or relay there's going to be. Something going to boomerang around later, and you're like, oh, whoa, that was not what was what I was expecting. But that's okay. That's part of the learning process. So again, that's why building in the breaks, thinking of us as a system. How does your system work in its prime? What does it need for fuel? What does it need for, upgrades, software and hardware, right? And so making sure we're looking at all those components is really important.
Definitely. Agreed.
My final question is designed to really be self-reflective, and it is about humanity. So let's say there's a life form that lands on Earth and they meet Samantha. You're the first human that they meet. What do they learn about humanity because they've met you?
Ooh, it's also a really good question. That humans can be, I think, like we've discussed before, very multidisciplinary and present many different strengths. I think, right, that we have such a capability for being intelligent and accomplishing and being able to, build and engineer and all of that. But we also have a different part of our brains that allow us to be more artistic and expressive and, build relationships with the people around us, build our communities. That's equally as important and propagates that ability to have that innovation and intelligence. Kind of, jumping into the lab again, the biggest contributor to having consistent knowledge transfer is mentorship, and students who like to give back to the lab and being able to mentor the newer members that join. And that is the only way possible that we're able to extend our innovation and engineering here. And I think there's a lot of people that have a great ability to do that, and that's what makes us very special.
Amazing. I love that. Yes, mentorship is so important because while we do have these capabilities to expand and compound and develop these multidisciplinary skill sets, we really do require help in those endeavors, and being able to ask for that and cultivate it and give back in different ways. It's an exchange, right? It's a receive and a give. It's this constant like renewal cycle, if you will.
Mhm.
And without that, then part of the equation will be missing, and there will be it won't be as optimized. So I love that you brought that into the picture as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Samantha, if people would like to get in touch with you after today's podcast, where can they connect? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, so I have a LinkedIn. Samantha Dolski is my name. Just look me up and I'll be there. Also, my email, Samantha Dolski at utexas.edu. that is a great way to reach me as well.
Okay, amazing. And if they want to learn more about the lab and what the work that you guys are doing there, is there somewhere where they can follow, maybe even support? I'm sure there's sponsorship opportunities and ways to donate and help support the initiatives that you guys are working on.
Yeah, so we have an Instagram, Texas Rocket Lab. You can follow us there, and we post many different updates and cool videos about our technical progress. So yeah, please
Cool.
reach out to us there.
Awesome. So they have a website as well, texasrocketlab.com or Texas Rocket Lab on IG. Please go and follow Samantha and see the amazing work that she and the lab and the UT Austin are up to. Samantha, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm walking away inspired, and I know our guests will as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone else who's listening in, please stay tuned. Please remember to like and comment and share this episode. Go ahead and subscribe on YouTube to stay up to date of the latest lounge episodes. We are going to have a little break for the end of this week and next week due to the eclipse, April 8th. If you're in the path of totality, you should be getting some eclipse glasses and looking up at the sky. It's a once in a lifetime event. So do go and look at space.com, Google Eclipse 2024, and get yourself some glasses. Share with us what you took away from the episode, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.